The rain stung Ethan's face as he ran through the neon-lit streets of Brooklyn, his heart pounding louder than the thunder above. He didn't care that his sneakers were soaked or that his leather jacket clung to his shoulders like a second skin. All he could hear was her voice, Lila's voice, whispering his name in that soft, unshakable way that made the world stop spinning. It had been 3 years since Ethan, 25, had last seen Lila, 28, the woman who'd turned his life into a kaleidoscope of color and chaos. Back then, they were just kids, two misfits in a small upstate New York town, bound by secrets they couldn't tell anyone else. Ethan, with his sharp jawline and guarded eyes, had always known he was different, that the way he loved wasn't something his family's church would ever bless. Lila, with her wild, ever-changing hair and fearless laugh, was the first person who saw him, really saw him, and didn't look away. Tonight, Ethan was chasing a rumor. A friend had spotted Lila at a queer poetry slam in the city, her name scrawled on a flyer for an underground art collective. Ethan had spent years trying to forget her touch, her scent, the way she'd whisper his name like it was a prayer. But the moment he heard she was in New York, he knew he'd never stopped loving her. He'd never stopped needing her. The bar was a cramped, dimly lit haven tucked between a laundromat and a bodega. The air smelled of cheap beer and patchouli, and the walls were plastered with flyers for drag shows and protests. Ethan pushed through the crowd, his pulse racing as he scanned for her. The stage was lit by a single spotlight, and there she was, Lila, her blue hair catching the light like a beacon. She stood at the microphone, reading poetry that cut through the noise like a blade. Her words were raw, jagged, full of love and pain and defiance. Every time you whisper my name, she read, her voice trembling but strong. The world freezes, and I'm not alone anymore. Ethan's breath caught. Those words, they were for him. He knew it in his bones. He waited until she finished, until the crowd erupted in applause and she stepped off the stage, her eyes scanning the room. When they locked onto his, time did freeze. For a moment, it was just them, no judgment, no fear, just the truth of who they were. Lila's lips parted, and she whispered his name again, barely audible over the din. Ethan felt his knees buckle, but he stayed upright, anchored by the weight of her gaze. Ethan, she said, louder now, crossing the room in 3 quick strides. What are you doing here? I heard you were back, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I couldn't stay away. Lila's eyes softened, but there was something else there, guarded, wary. It's been 3 years. Ethan, a lot's changed. I know, he said, stepping closer. But not this. Not us. She laughed, a sharp, bittersweet sound. You always were a dreamer. They found a corner booth, the noise of the bar fading as they talked. Lila told him about her life since they'd parted, how she'd left their hometown after her family disowned her for coming out as bisexual, how she'd found a chosen family in the city's queer community, how she'd fought to carve out a space where she could be herself. Ethan listened, his heart aching with every word. He'd stayed behind, trapped in a town that felt like a cage, working a dead-end job at a hardware store while his parents prayed for his redemption. I never stopped thinking about you, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Every day, Lila. Every damn day. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. The touch was electric, a spark that lit up every nerve in his body. I missed you too, she said, her voice breaking. But it's not that simple anymore. I'm not the same person I was. Neither am I, Ethan said, his eyes locked on hers. But I'm here now, and I'm not running away again. The bar was closing, but they didn't care. They spilled out onto the street, the rain still falling, and stood under a flickering streetlight. Lila's hair was damp, clinging to her face, and Ethan wanted nothing more than to reach out and tuck it behind her ear. But he hesitated, sensing the weight of the years between them. "There's something you need to know," Lila said, her voice steady but heavy. "I'm with someone. Her name's Mara. She's important to me." Ethan's heart sank, but he nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Okay," he said, "but I'm not giving up on us. Not yet." Lila's eyes searched his, and for a moment, he saw the girl he'd loved, the one who'd danced with him in empty parking lots, who'd promised they'd escape together. "Ethan," she whispered, and the world froze again. They parted ways that night, but Ethan knew this was only the beginning. He'd found her again, and no matter what stood between them, Mara, the past, or the weight of a world that didn't always understand, wasn't letting go. Not this time. The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of his phone buzzing on the nightstand. It was a text from Lila. "Meet me at the park. Noon. We need to talk." His heart leapt, but the words felt ominous, like a storm gathering on the horizon. He pulled on his jacket and headed out, the city alive with the hum of traffic and the chatter of strangers. Washington Square Park was a riot of color street performers, dog walkers, and students sprawled on the grass. Ethan spotted Lila near the fountain, her blue hair unmistakable. She was sitting on a bench, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, and beside her was a woman with long, dark curls and a quiet intensity. "Mara," Ethan assumed, his stomach twisting. "Ethan," Lila said as he approached, her voice softer than the night before. "This is Mara." Mara stood, offering a hand. She was striking tall, with warm brown eyes and a guarded smile. "I've heard a lot about you," she said, her tone neutral but not unkind. Ethan shook her hand, feeling the weight of her gaze. She was 30, he guessed, with an air of confidence that made him feel small. "Thanks for coming," Lila said, her eyes darting between them. "I didn't want this to be weird." Ethan forced a smile. "Too late for that." They sat, the three of them, in an awkward triangle. Lila explained how she and Mara had met at a community center, how Mara had been there for her when she was rebuilding her life. "She's my rock," Lila said, glancing at Mara with a tenderness that made Ethan's chest ache. But then her eyes met his, and there was something else, guilt, maybe, or longing. "I don't know what this is," Lila admitted, her voice raw. "You showing up, Ethan. It stirred things up, things I thought I'd buried." Mara's jaw tightened, but she stayed silent, letting Lila speak. Ethan wanted to reach for Lila's hand, to pull her back to the nights they'd spent dreaming of a future where they could be free. But Mara's presence was a wall he couldn't breach. "I'm not here to mess things up," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "But I can't pretend I don't love you, Lila. I never could." The words hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. Mara shifted, her eyes narrowing. "Lila's happy," she said, her voice calm but firm. "She's built something real here." "What are you offering her, Ethan?" "A memory." The question hit like a punch. Ethan opened his mouth to answer, but nothing came out. He didn't have a plan. Not really. All he had was the ache in his chest and the sound of Lila's voice echoing in his head. Lila stood, her hands trembling. "I need time," she said, looking at both of them. "I need to figure this out." She walked away, leaving Ethan and Mara staring at each other. "She loves you," Mara said quietly, her voice laced with pain. "But she loves me too. Don't make her choose until you're sure you can give her everything." Ethan watched Mara leave, her words searing into him. He wandered the park for hours, replaying every moment with Lila, the stolen kisses, the whispered promises, the way she'd made him feel like he wasn't broken. But Mara's words haunted him. What could he offer? A life on the run from his past. A heart full of love, but no stability. That night, Ethan went to another poetry slam, hoping to see Lila again. She wasn't there, but the words of the performers echoed her own stories of love, loss, and the fight to be seen. He scribbled in a notebook, pouring out his feelings in messy, jagged lines. Every time you whisper my name, the world freezes. But what happens when it thaws? He didn't know if he was ready to fight for her, but he knew he couldn't walk away. Not yet. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan threw himself into finding Lila again. He haunted the city's queer spaces, cafes, bookstores, art galleries, hoping for a glimpse of her. Every time he heard a laugh that sounded like hers, his heart raced, only to crash when it wasn't her. But he kept searching, driven by the memory of her whisper. One evening, he found her at a community art show in a converted warehouse in Bushwick. The space was alive with color canvases splashed with bold strokes, sculptures made of found objects, and music pulsing through the crowd. Lila was in the corner, hanging a painting. It was a swirling mix of blues and golds, a figure caught in a storm of light and shadow. Ethan knew it was about them. Lila, he called softly, stepping closer. She turned, her face a mix of surprise and exhaustion. You don't give up, do you? She said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Not when it's you, he replied, his voice steady. They stepped outside, the cool night air a relief from the crowded warehouse. Lila leaned against the brick wall, her scarf loose around her neck. I told Mara about us, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. About how I feel. Ethan's heart skipped. And she's hurt, Lila admitted, her eyes glistening. But she wants me to be honest. With her. With myself. Ethan took a step closer, his hands itching to reach for her. What does that mean, Lila? For us. She shook her head, tears spilling over. I don't know. I love Mara. She's steady, safe. But you. You're my past, my what if. Every time I think of you, it's like the world stops, and I'm back in that parking lot with you, feeling like I could do anything. Ethan's throat tightened. I feel it too. Every time you whisper my name, it's like I'm whole again. They stood there, inches apart, the city humming around them. Ethan could feel the pull between them, magnetic and undeniable. But Lila stepped back, wiping her eyes. I need to figure out who I am now, Ethan. Not just who I was with you. He nodded, his heart aching but resolute. I'll wait. As long as it takes. The next day, Ethan started volunteering at the community center where Lila and Mara had met. He wanted to understand her world, to be part of it. The center was a haven for queer youth, a place where people could be themselves without fear. Ethan helped with art classes, listening to kids share their stories that echoed his own. It made him feel closer to Lila, even if she wasn't there. But Mara was. She was a counselor at the center, her presence calm and commanding. Ethan watched her work, saw the way she made everyone feel seen. He understood why Lila loved her. Mara was everything Ethan was: stable, grounded, sure of herself. One afternoon, Mara pulled him aside. You're not giving up, are you? She said, her voice low but not hostile. No, Ethan said, meeting her gaze. But I'm not here to hurt anyone. I just want to be near her. Mara studied him, her expression unreadable. She's worth fighting for, she said finally. But so am I. Ethan nodded, respect growing between them. They were rivals, but they shared something deeper, a love for Lila that defined them both. Ethan's days at the community center became a routine, a way to anchor himself while he waited for Lila to decide. He threw himself into the work, teaching kids to paint, to write, to express the things they couldn't say out loud. It was healing, in a way, to see himself in their eyes, the fear, the hope, the quiet rebellion of being true to who they were. Lila started showing up at the center too, helping with events or just hanging out. They didn't talk about the future, but they fell into an easy rhythm, sharing coffee, laughing over old memories, stealing glances that said more than words ever could. Ethan felt the spark between them growing, but he also saw the way Lila looked at Mara, steady, grateful, conflicted. One night, the center hosted a queer dance party, a fundraiser for youth programs. The room was a swirl of lights and music, bodies moving freely, unapologetically. Ethan watched Lila from across the room, her blue hair glowing under the neon lights as she danced with Mara. They moved together like they'd done it 1,000 times, their bodies in sync. Ethan's heart twisted, but he couldn't look away. When the song ended, Lila caught his eye and walked over. "Dance with me," she said, her voice playful but edged with something deeper. Ethan hesitated, glancing at Mara, who was watching them with a guarded expression. But Lila took his hand, pulling him onto the dance floor. The music was slow now, a soft ballad that made the air feel heavy. They swayed together, her hands on his shoulders, his on her waist. It felt like coming home. "You're making this hard," Lila whispered, her breath warm against his cheek. "Good," Ethan said, his voice low. "I want you to feel it. To remember." She laughed softly, but her eyes were serious. "I never forgot, Ethan. Not once." The song ended, and they stood there, still holding each other, the world blurring around them. Mara approached, her expression unreadable. "Can I cut in?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Ethan stepped back, his heart pounding. Lila looked between them, her eyes full of conflict. "I need air," she said suddenly, and walked out, leaving Ethan and Mara staring at each other. Outside, Ethan found her sitting on the curb, her head in her hands. "I'm tearing everything apart," she said, her voice breaking. "You?" "Mara." "Myself." Ethan sat beside her, the pavement cold against his legs. "You're not tearing anything apart," he said. "You're just feeling. And that's okay." She looked at him, tears streaking her face. "I don't know how to choose, Ethan. I don't even know if I should choose." He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Then don't. Not yet. Just let yourself feel it all." They sat there in silence, the city pulsing around them. Ethan didn't know what the future held, but he knew he'd fight for every moment with her, no matter how fleeting. The weeks that followed were a tightrope walk. Ethan and Lila grew closer, their connection deepening with every shared moment. But Mara was always there, a reminder of the life Lila had built. Ethan didn't push, didn't demand answers, but the tension was palpable. Every glance, every touch, was a question neither of them could fully answer. One afternoon, Lila invited Ethan to her apartment, a small, colorful space filled with art and books. Mara wasn't there, and the air felt different, intimate, unguarded. They sat on the couch, a bottle of wine between them, and talked about everything and nothing. The conversation drifted to their past, to the nights they'd spent dreaming of a world where they could be themselves. "Do you ever wonder what it would have been like?" Lila asked, her voice soft. "If we'd left together, like we planned." "Every day," Ethan admitted, his heart racing. "I think about the life we could have had. The one we still could." Lila's eyes met his, and for a moment, the world did freeze. She leaned in, her lips brushing his, tentative at first, then hungry. The kiss was fire and memory, a collision of past and present. Ethan's hands found her face, pulling her closer, and for those few seconds, nothing else existed. But then she pulled back, her breath ragged. "I can't," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "Not like this. Not when I'm still with Mara." Ethan nodded, his chest tight. "I know, but I'm not going anywhere." That night, Lila told Mara about the kiss. Ethan wasn't there, but he could imagine the pain in Mara's eyes, the way her steady calm would crack. When Lila called him the next day, her voice was raw. "Mara's moving out," she said. "She needs space. I don't know what happens now." Ethan's heart soared and sank at once. He wanted Lila, more than anything, but not at the cost of her happiness. He met her at a diner, the kind with sticky tables and endless coffee refills. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying. "I love you both," she said, her voice breaking. "But it's not fair to either of you. I need to figure out who I am without being someone's everything." Ethan reached for her hand, his touch gentle. "You don't have to be anyone's everything. Just be you. I'll love you no matter what." She smiled through her tears, and for the first time, Ethan saw a flicker of clarity in her eyes. Maybe she didn't have to choose not yet, not in the way the world expected. Maybe love didn't have to be a battlefield. With Mara gone, Lila threw herself into her art, her poetry, her community. Ethan was there for it all, a steady presence as she rebuilt herself. They didn't talk about the kiss, but it lingered between them, a promise and a question. Ethan kept volunteering at the center, finding purpose in the work, in the kids who reminded him of his younger self. One night, Lila asked him to read at a poetry slam. "You've been writing," she said, nodding at the notebook he always carried. "Share it. Let people see you." Ethan hesitated. He'd never read his words aloud, never bared his soul like that. But Lila's eyes were so sure, so full of belief in him, that he couldn't say no. When he took the stage, his hands shook, but her voice in his head, "Ethan, you're enough," kept him steady. He read about love, about the ache of being seen, about the way her whisper made the world stop. The crowd was silent, then erupted, their applause washing over him like a tide. Lila was in the front row, her eyes shining with pride. Afterward, they walked through the city, the night alive with possibility. "You were incredible," Lila said, her voice warm. "I always knew you had that in you." "You make me believe it," Ethan said, stopping under a streetlight. "You always have." She looked at him, her expression soft but serious. "I'm not ready for promises, Ethan, but I'm ready to try. With you." His heart soared, but he kept his voice steady. "That's enough for me." They started spending more time together, not as lovers, not yet, but as something deeper, partners in a journey neither of them fully understood. They went to protests, painted murals, laughed until their sides hurt. Ethan felt himself changing, growing into the person he'd always wanted to be. But Mara wasn't gone completely. She came to the center sometimes, her presence a quiet reminder of the love she and Lila had shared. Ethan respected her, admired her, even. They were no longer rivals, but two people who loved the same extraordinary woman. As winter settled over the city, Ethan and Lila grew closer, their connection a delicate balance of hope and caution. They didn't label what they had, didn't force it into a box. They were just them. Ethan found a job at an art supply store, a step toward stability, and Lila's paintings started selling at local galleries. They were building something, piece by piece. One night, they went to a rooftop party, the city sparkling below them. The air was crisp, their breath visible as they leaned against the railing. Lila turned to him, her eyes bright. "I'm happy, Ethan," she said. "Really happy." He smiled, his heart full. "Me too." She took his hand, her fingers warm against his. "I don't know what this is," she said, her voice soft. "But I know I want you in my life. Always." Ethan's throat tightened. "Always," he echoed. They kissed again, this time slow and sure, a promise of something real. The world didn't freeze, it expanded, filled with possibility. Ethan knew it wouldn't be easy. That love never was. But he was ready to fight for it. Mara came back into their lives, not as a rival, but as a friend. She and Lila talked, healed, found a way to coexist. Ethan admired their strength, their ability to love without possession. He learned from them, grew with them. The three of them started working on a community project mural for the center, a celebration of queer love and resilience. Ethan painted alongside Lila and Mara, their brushes moving in harmony. It was messy, imperfect, beautiful. The mural was unveiled on a bright spring day, the community center buzzing with excitement. It was a riot of color blues, golds, reds telling a story of love, struggle, and triumph. Ethan stood beside Lila, their hands brushing, as the crowd cheered. Mara was there too, her smile proud and bittersweet. After the unveiling, Lila pulled Ethan aside. "I wrote something for you," she said, handing him a folded piece of paper. He opened it, his heart racing as he read her words. "Every time you whisper my name, the world freezes and I know I'm not alone in this love. I love you," she said, her voice steady. "Not just as a memory, but as my now. My future." Ethan pulled her close, his eyes stinging. "I love you too," he whispered, and the world froze one last time. They didn't have all the answers. Love wasn't a neat story with a perfect ending. But as they stood together, surrounded by their chosen family, Ethan knew they'd found something true, something worth fighting for. The mural stood as a testament to their journey, not just Ethan and Lila's, but Mara's, the kids at the center, the community that had held them up. It was a reminder that love, in all its messy, beautiful forms, could change the world. And every time Lila whispered his name, Ethan knew he wasn't alone.